The UK government has proposed a plan to roll out not for EU labels to all food products sold in Great Britain, and that means England, Scotland, and Wales, starting in October 2024. This plan has met with significant criticism from industry groups and consumer advocates who argue that it is unnecessary, costly, and could damage the UK's reputation as a food exporter. The UK government has stated that the purpose of the not for EU labels is to prevent food products from being inadvertently diverted from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, where they would be subject to different labeling and regulatory requirements. This is because Northern Ireland remains part of the EU single market for goods, while Great Britain is not. However, many industry groups argue that the not for EU labels are unnecessary because there are already robust controls in place to prevent goods from being misdirected. They also point out that the labels could cause confusion among consumers who may worry that the products are unsafe or of poor quality. The main criticisms of the plan include, for example, unnecessary costs, as I said. Businesses would be required to add the labels to all their packaging, which would be a significant expense, of course. And another is the damage to exports. The labels could put off foreign buyers who may perceive them as a sign of poor quality or non-compliance with EU standards. And despite what they say, the standards are very appreciated. And it could be confusing for consumers. Consumers in Great Britain are unlikely to understand the purpose of the labels, and they could be put off by the negative connotations of the phrase not for EU. And so all the critics have proposed alternative solutions. The industry groups have proposed a number of alternative solutions, and one of them, for example, is just targeted labeling. Labeling only those products that are particularly susceptible to mishandling, such as those with short shelf lives. Or another proposal is data-driven tracking, using electronic tracking systems to ensure that products are not diverted to Northern Ireland. And another is a clearer communication, providing better information to businesses and consumers about the rules that apply to goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland is indeed another suggestion here. The UK government has not yet finalized the plan for UK-wide rollout of not for EU labels. However, the proposal has met with widespread opposition, and it is unclear whether the government will really proceed with it. In the meantime, businesses are urged to review their labeling requirements and consider the alternative solutions that have been proposed. When Rishi Sunak signed his new Brexit deal in February, he boasted that it would deliver smooth-flowing trade with the whole United Kingdom, as we all know. But just 2 months after the Windsor Framework came into effect, it's having huge unintended consequences for a key export sector with hundreds of millions of pounds in trade now at risk. Since October this year, all meat and some dairy products moving from Great Britain to be sold in Northern Ireland, which is still a part of the UK, have been required to carry not for EU labels already. It's meant to ensure that goods aren't moved onward into the Republic of Ireland, which is an EU member country. And from October 24, all meat and dairy products sold right across the UK will also have to include the labels, even if there's no intention to ever send the products to Northern Ireland. And as I said, the requirement will be applied to more UK food products from July 25. And it applies whether the food is produced in the UK or imported. And businesses say the plans for a UK-wide rollout go way beyond Brussels requirements as set out in the Windsor Framework, and crucially, could see EU exports plummet because of the costs and inefficiency of doing separate production runs for British and European markets. For example, Sean Ramson, director of the Food and Drink Exporters Association and the CEO of food export business Ramson International, described the new system as absolutely cataclysmic for food exporters. Ramson told media he fears that eventually all of the products he's supplied with by partner Co-op will be labeled not for EU, which means they can't export them to the EU. And while large manufacturers may find it easier to comply with the new rules, Ramson says the changes could prove too costly for smaller operations. A lot of manufacturers will probably just give up on the European market, he said. It seems an inconsequential thing to say put it onto the packaging, but in practice it means changing production runs. And manufacturers are saying this is crazy because they don't want to start doing additional production runs. His concerns were echoed by Baldwin de Dude, Director of Sustainability and Growth at the Food and Drink Federation. He told British MPs recently that implementation costs of the labelling requirement would run into the hundreds of millions of pounds a year across the industry. It generates a risk for hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds worth of exports. That's what he told MPs last month. That is an unnecessary domestic policy. You cannot have a trade policy that is trying to promote exports on the one hand and then undermine that with domestic policy on the other, he said. A spokesperson for the group, which represents food and drink manufacturers, said the labeling removes the flexibility that was agreed with the EU and will result in less choice for shoppers in both Northern Ireland and Great Britain. A more pragmatic approach would be to monitor supply before taking action and work with the industry to find a practical solution, they say. Although the UK-wide labelling requirements do not come into force until October next year, some manufacturers appear to already be using the labeling system in preparation for the rollout. As a result, Ramson says his company is having to do manual checks on everything, take out the labeled product from the order, return them to the supplier, credit them to the customer, and take them off their list. And another unintended consequence, Ramson warns, is that non-EU consumers will be put off by the not for EU labels, as I said earlier. If we export to other markets, what are the consumers going to think when they see not for EU on the packaging? They are going to question whether it's safe, Ramson said. For Ramson, the labeling requirement is just the latest in a string of headaches resulting from the UK and their leaving the EU, which has already seen the company's sales with the union plummet from 25 million to 16 million pounds as a result of Brexit. This will finish it all because we are supplied by stocks that's in circulation in the UK market, he said. And a government spokesperson said about this, the Windsor framework drastically reduces the paperwork and processes required compared to the old protocol. We continue to engage extensively with businesses to support them in adapting to these new arrangements. But as we heard, the ones really affected by this are obviously neither believing nor thinking that this is any help at all if that labeling is coming UK-wide. I also don't know why they want to do that. Honestly. If you want to know something else, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.